They were surrounded by everything the world said should bring peace: money, comfort, technology, even moments of laughter. But something inside remained unsettled. It was like sitting in the middle of a loud crowd, smiling for the camera, while the soul whispered for something more. They tried to quiet that voice with distractions, with busyness, with goals that shifted as soon as they reached them. But peace, real peace, never came. And the strange part was, the world never stopped to question that. Everyone just kept going, pretending they weren't aching inside too. They thought maybe peace was just a myth, or something reserved for spiritual gurus or people who had the luxury of silence. But then something happened. It wasn't planned, it wasn't dramatic. It started with a few conversations, a few moments spent with Muslims who seemed different. Not different in dress or culture, but in spirit. There was something steady about them, something calm in the way they spoke, in the way they handled hardship, in the way they paused before sunset just to pray. Even when life was racing forward, that caught their attention because they had never seen that before, not in the movies, not in the news, not even in classrooms. Islam, as it was shown to them by the world, was loud, harsh, and intimidating. But what they were seeing in real life was the opposite. It was gentle, it was disciplined, and it was quiet in the most beautiful way. So they got curious, not about religion, not yet, but about that calm. Where did it come from? How did it stay during pain, loss, or uncertainty? How could someone pray through tears and still have peace on their face? The more they asked, the more they saw. And the more they saw, the more they felt something opening inside their chest. They started reading, listening, watching. Muslims talk about their connection with God. And then one night they listened to the Quran, not with an agenda, not to criticize, just to understand. And what they heard wasn't just words. It was truth. It was like their heart had been waiting for that sound all along. The calm they had been chasing for years was suddenly right in front of them. Islam didn't come to them with force or pressure. It came as an invitation, a quiet knock on the door of the heart, a reminder that peace doesn't come from controlling life. It comes from surrendering it to the one who already knows everything. That idea alone brought more comfort than anything else in the world. They started to pray. They didn't even know all the words yet, but the act itself, the bowing, the silence, the rhythm, felt like medicine. It didn't solve all their problems, but it gave them the strength to face them. And more importantly, it gave them meaning in the middle of the chaos. There's a calm in Islam that the world never showed them. And once they tasted it, nothing else could compare. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, it was real. And real peace doesn't need to shout. It just settles into your soul and stays. They spent most of their life surrounded by constant noise. From morning alarms to evening notifications, the world never stopped talking. Social media screamed expectations, society whispered fears, and even moments of quiet were filled with overthinking. They tried everything the world recommended to find peace: therapy, self-help books, travel, even silence retreats. But the inner restlessness remained. It was like standing still in the middle of a storm. Everyone around them acted like this chaos was normal, like peace was something you chased, but never really caught. What they didn't know was that the calm they were looking for wasn't in the world, it was inside them, waiting to be unlocked by something greater. The turning point came quietly, without warning. It began with a simple conversation with a Muslim friend. The way they spoke about life, hardship, and gratitude didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded real. There was no pressure to convert, no big speech about religion, just a soft strength in their words and a kind of stillness in their eye. It felt like the first moment of real quiet in years. Something inside stirred, a curiosity, a spark. As days passed, they began noticing more. Muslims pausing during the day to pray, not rushing or complaining, just stepping away from the world to bow and reflect. They saw people facing loss, poverty, even injustice, with a kind of patience and dignity that confused them. How could anyone have peace in the middle of that? It didn't make sense, not in the world they knew. So they began to listen, not to the media, but to the people. And then, one night, they heard the Quran. Not all of it, not even with full understanding, but it was enough. The words felt like they were coming from somewhere deeper, like they were meant just for them. It wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, but it reached the part of their heart that the world had ignored. In that moment, they realized the calm they'd searched for their whole life didn't need to be built. It just needed to be uncovered. And Islam, with all its simplicity and silence, was the key. They always believed that peace came from comfort, financial stability, emotional security, success, and recognition. But the more they achieved, the more they felt something wasn't right. There were good days, of course, days where everything seemed to go according to plan. But even then, when the world was quiet and the lights were off, there was still an ache inside, a strange emptiness that no applause could fill, no vacation could heal, and no relationship could fix. The world told them to chase more, work harder, stay busy, but nothing ever lasted. Peace was temporary, fleeting, and always tied to something external. It was a reward for good moments, not a constant presence in their life. That all changed the day they met someone who lived with a different kind of peace. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dependent on mood or success. It was calm, consistent, and deeply rooted. And that someone was a practicing Muslim. What struck them wasn't just the person's words, it was their presence. A softness in how they handled difficult conversations, a patience in how they listened, and a grace in how they carried themselves through both joy and pain. At first, they thought it was just personality, but soon they realized it was something more. It was faith, a relationship with God that wasn't just ritual or religion, it was a lifeline. It gave them stability when everything else was uncertain. They watched as this person paused everything for prayer 5 times a day, without complaint. They saw them fast with contentment, give to others with joy, and speak truth even when it was uncomfortable. And every time they saw that same calm. Eventually, curiosity won over fear, and they started asking questions. What they found wasn't what the world had shown them about Islam. It wasn't angry or rigid. It was gentle, thoughtful, and surprisingly personal. It didn't ask them to be perfect. It invited them to be real. And in that honesty, they found relief. Because for the first time in their life, they realized peace doesn't come from controlling life. It comes from surrendering to the one who already controls it all. They had heard about prayer before, seen it in movies, read about it in books, but it always felt like a ritual, something done out of obligation or habit. But when they saw a Muslim quietly roll out a prayer mat and begin to pray, everything changed. There was something different about it. It wasn't a show. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't loud. It was intimate. Each movement had meaning, and each word carried weight, even if they didn't understand the language. There was a calm in that moment that stilled everything around them. It was like the world paused while this person connected with something far greater. And it made them wonder, what kind of faith brings that kind of peace? As they began to observe more, they noticed how prayer wasn't limited to emergencies or holidays. It was part of life, part of the rhythm of the day. Muslims would stop whatever they were doing, work, conversations, even rest, just to pray. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And that dedication, that consistency, sparked a deep curiosity. What could possibly make someone disconnect from the chaos of the world 5 times a day without hesitation? When they asked, the answer was simple yet profound. Because that's when I feel the most alive. That's when I feel closest to peace. So they tried it, just once, just to see. They found a quiet space, copied the movements they had seen, and whispered what little they knew. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even fully correct, but something happened. In that silence, in that act of submission, their heart felt something new. Relief. It was like they had been carrying invisible weight for years, and for the first time they set it down. That moment stayed with them, it replayed in their mind, tugged at their soul, and gently pulled them back every time they felt overwhelmed. Prayer in Islam wasn't just an act, it was a sanctuary. A break from the noise, a shelter from the storm, a reminder that peace doesn't have to wait for a perfect life. It's available now, in stillness, in surrender, and in every whispered prayer. They had spent most of their life in a world that taught them to chase stimulation. Louder, faster, flashier, social media feeds, late-night parties, endless distractions. It was all designed to keep the mind busy, to avoid silence, to drown out the inner void. But silence always caught up eventually. In the quiet of the night, or during a moment alone, that deep emptiness would return. That's when they realized the world had trained them to fear silence because silence made them feel. It made them confront what they were running from. But when they looked at Islam, they noticed something completely different. Islam embraced silence. It welcomed reflection. It honored stillness. For the first time, they met people who weren't afraid of quiet. People who woke before sunrise, not to check their phones, but to pray in peaceful solitude. That image stuck in their mind. Someone standing alone in the dark, whispering prayers with complete calm. There was no spotlight, no applause, no validation, just peace. And it wasn't an isolated event, it was a lifestyle, a rhythm that aligned the body and soul. Islam wasn't about chasing highs. It was about returning again and again to a center of calm through prayer, remembrance, and gratitude. They noticed that Muslims didn't just pray when life was hard. They prayed in routine, in ease, in gratitude. It wasn't reactive, it was proactive. And in that consistency, they found something the modern world had never given them: stability. While the world rushed forward with noise, Islam offered a moment to breathe, a sacred pause, a reminder that it's okay to slow down, that reflection is strength, that silence can be healing. The calm in Islam wasn't just emotional, it was spiritual. It came from knowing that God hears even your silent thoughts, that you don't need to impress anyone to be worthy of love, that you can cry without shame, ask without fear, and hope without limit. That level of comfort with one's Creator is what anchored the soul. And the more they saw it, the more they desired it. Not for a day, not for a phase, but for life. Because once you taste that calm, the chaos of the world no longer controls you. They had always been told that strength meant being tough, pushing through pain, hiding emotion, and standing tall even when you were breaking inside. But no matter how much they pretended to be okay, the pressure would build until it broke them in private. The world celebrated that kind of strength, one that looked powerful on the outside, but was silently suffering on the inside. Then they witnessed a different kind of strength, one that didn't require pretending. It came from a woman reciting verses of the Quran with tears in her eyes, not weakness but peace. It came from a man who had just buried a loved one but still whispered, "Alhamdulillah, praise be to God." That strength wasn't loud. It was rooted, unshakable. And it came from faith. What they saw in Islam was a different definition of strength, one that embraced vulnerability, one that allowed you to cry but still have hope, one that let you fall but gave you the tools to get back up again. Islam didn't expect perfection. It honored effort. It didn't shame brokenness. It brought healing through prayer, patience, and remembrance of God. This was the calm they never saw on TV. The calm of someone who could face storms with a heart that whispered, "God is with me." That kind of faith didn't make you immune to pain, but it made you resilient through it. They started to reflect on the rituals in Islam, the way Muslims wash before prayer as if cleansing not just their body but their stress. The way they stand in prayer, placing their forehead on the ground in complete submission, not to give up, but to rise stronger. Every act of worship carried meaning, and every meaning brought a quiet calm. It wasn't theatrical, it was deeply personal. And for the first time, strength didn't feel exhausting. It felt peaceful. This shift in understanding changed everything. They no longer sought peace in being tough enough. They sought it in being connected to God, to purpose, to something greater than the moment. That connection gave them the strength to live with peace, not just chase it. And once they tasted that calm, nothing else compared. It was the strength they didn't know they needed, and the peace they never knew they were missing. They had always thought religion was just a set of rules, restrictions, do's and don'ts, boundaries meant to confine. That's what the world showed them. That's what they had been taught to believe. But Islam revealed something they never expected. Those boundaries were actually a path to freedom, true freedom, because the world without limits had already exhausted them. It promised happiness in doing whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted, but left them feeling lost and empty. In Islam, they found discipline, but within that discipline, they found peace. A kind of structure that didn't suffocate, but guided. A way of living that gave meaning to each day, each act, each choice. They started to notice the way Islam gave clarity to confusion. In a world full of conflicting ideas, Islam stood firm, consistent, clear, unshaken. It didn't shift with trends. It didn't change with opinion. It provided something the modern world lacked: stability. That stability brought calm, because when you know who you are, why you're here, and where you're going, your heart stops racing for answers. Your mind becomes still. You no longer live in anxiety about every decision, every storm, every turn. Islam simplifies life in the most powerful way by reminding them that everything has a purpose, even pain. They realized the calm in Islam wasn't about escaping life, it was about facing life with faith. A believer doesn't live without hardship, but they live with the assurance that nothing happens without reason and nothing is ever lost in the eyes of God. Even the tears, even the silent prayers, even the moments no one else sees, they all matter. That belief lifted a weight they didn't even realize they were carrying. It was as if their soul had been holding its breath, and now finally it could exhale. The world had shown them chaos, distraction, noise. But Islam gave them stillness, presence, clarity. It taught them that peace isn't something you find outside, it's something you build inside, through connection with the one who created you. And once they felt that, they couldn't unsee it. The calm wasn't a moment, it was a state of being. A reality that no longer needed to be chased, because now they were living it. The journey to inner peace isn't always loud. Sometimes it begins in silence, in a moment the world overlooks. And for many, that moment is the first time they see Islam, not as the media shows it, but as it truly is, a path to calm, clarity, and connection with something far greater than this world. That calm doesn't come from material success or temporary highs. It comes from knowing why you were created. It comes from waking up before sunrise, whispering prayers when the world is still asleep, and knowing that every breath, every step, and every hardship has purpose. Islam didn't shout at the world, it invited. It didn't force, it guided. And in that guidance, people who were once lost, broken, or confused found healing, direction, and peace. A peace that doesn't fade when things go wrong. A peace that stays because it's built on faith, trust, and surrender. That is the calm the world never showed. That is the calm Islam carried. To everyone watching, thank you for giving your time, your heart, and your attention. If this message touched something deep inside you, know that it's not a coincidence. It could be a calling, a sign, a moment meant for you. Don't let it pass. Explore, reflect, ask, and most of all, listen to your soul. Because sometimes the truth your heart has been searching for isn't found in noise. It's found in the calm. Thank you for being here. Thank you for opening your heart. And may you too find the peace this world could never show you, but that Islam was always ready to give.